There we go. All right, we have sound. For some reason, between going from Teams to Discord to this, it loses properties. I don't know why, but we'll make it work. I'll try to talk a little bit louder. We're working off of my webcam's mic right now, so I'll see if I can be a bit louder. If it gets to a point where I'm just really the level isn't there, I can pop on my headphones and we can do it that way instead. So, anyways, welcome to Lord of the Rings Online Casual Stroll Through the Lone Lands. We've been doing this for about 6 months now. You all have been voting on what regions you would like to take a stroll through, and the most recent winner has been Lone Lands. For as much attention as things like the Trollshaws have gotten in previous votes, it really didn't hold up compared to the Lone Lands, though it was really close with Enedwaith. So for those of you who haven't joined this stream before, my name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards. I'm a senior world designer for Lord of the Rings Online. And this is a stream to just kind of casually walk through a portion of Middle-earth, talk about it, and also, answer your questions. Do bear in mind, I am a world designer. I am not going to be answering any questions regarding game systems, engineering, performance, stuff that's coming up for the expansion pack. I want to keep this purely focused on world design stuff. I know there are a lot of questions that you guys have about this stuff, so I'm happy to answer them. If there are questions that I can't answer, I'm gonna have to apologize in advance, and I won't be able to answer them. There may be some things that you asked too that Cordovan can pitch in on as well. So, as I had mentioned, the winner of the last vote was Lone Lands. Oh, one other thing, I keep forgetting to do this. If you don't see me take a drink, remind me so I can have a drink of water. So the last vote was a close one. Lone Lands won. Lone Lands is one of the kind of first areas that we ever built, and it is actually the area that when we were preparing the game to go to E3, Amun Sul, the Weathertop instance, was one of our big E3 moments. And I know there were several people that had worked really hard to get that experience in shape for that show. And I don't think much of that original instance really exists anymore in game, which is a unfortunate thing, because I know that they put a lot of work into it. In fact, Weathertop in general has changed a lot from what it was originally. So before I start my run through, we'll just take a quick look at chat over here. Audio seems good. So the first question from Iwanar is, the entire region seems out of place in Eriador. It's better than it used to be with more ground cover, but it still seems arid and barren compared to the rest of the regions. It's Northern Europe, not Central Asia. Why was it designed differently? So honestly, part of the reason for the design of the Lone Lands as it was to try to provide a variety of biomes in the space. And there was some degree of lore background that allowed us to kind of push it in a more arid direction. That said, knowing how biomes work and geography works, things like this, there's not always often this drastic of a shift, but those shifts in regions do exist. I think the trickier thing for us will be in the future, if we ever build to the north and south, is how can we kind of provide something that feels like it integrates with the rest of the world, while also still kind of being distinctly Lone Lands. Very recently, or I shouldn't say recently, but within the last couple of years, we did do some work on the Lone Lands to kind of introduce some more of our more modern scene file tech usages, and some of our more modern terrain textures and scene assets in there. Though there are several assets that are still some of my favorite ones in the game. I love these trees here. They're some of my favorite. But I don't disagree that there is a degree of kind of stark contrast between places like Breland and the Trollshaws on either side. So as you enter into the Lone Lands, one of the first things you see is the Forsaken Inn. I know I spent a lot of time here when I was a lower level character, and there's a lot of content to do in this space. It just kind of like bounces you back and forth all over. Um, and take a quick jump into the Forsaken Inn for anyone that hasn't been in a while. This has actually been kind of a... I think the Forsaken Inn stands out as kind of one of the like hallmark interior spaces. Like if anyone's got nostalgia, like they'll think about the Prancing Pony, but then they'll also think about the Forsaken Inn. Particularly with this open to sky thing, I remember when it was first built. Like this was really one of our first tests of the open to sky tech for dungeons, and it was just a lot of fun to see to see it actually work. Um, this is an interesting interior too, because it does it's one of those where I think the exterior representations of a lot of our buildings are often end up being smaller than the interior interpretations, which leads to a little bit of a TARDIS effect. But I think that's one of the concessions that we kind of make in the interest of gameplay. I actually have not really been in this space since we introduced the new attenuated lighting system. And so running around in here and seeing how the lighting is down here is a little jarring, and I think I need to make a note to myself to come in and clean this up a little bit. I think we can do a lot better with our lighting now than it currently is, at least on those lower levels. I think this section here kind of holds up pretty well still, though. Let's get back on my goat. So let's see, another couple other questions as we go down through. So Weathertop is not really compatible with story, by the way. How could anyone be on top of this Weathertop and be seen by riders from the road? I think that there is a certain degree of concession allowed for the particularly impressive forces of evil to have abilities beyond what would normally be available. Also, I know a major point of story through a lot of not just this region, but throughout the game and throughout the lore is that there are other creatures and beasts in the world that act as spies for Sauron and other forces of evil, and often those are the Kraban. We'll go up the hill here. Let's see. Lone Lands looked nice, though the original red hue of that region made it. Sadly, the revamp removed some of it. It has been a very long time since I've done much work in the Lone Lands, so I don't entirely remember the red hue. I do know that the skies can be particularly impressive at certain times of day. We're starting to head in towards nighttime here, so I may shift this back towards dawn at some point so that we're not running around in the dark completely. I think this is one of the things that I think we did a lot of in the Lone Lands as kind of a challenge for ourselves as developers or as designers was like we had done smaller ruins throughout other areas, but the Lone Lands was really kind of the first initial big usage of ruins as kind of a playground throughout the space, which was I think fun for some of us, but also like looking at how we built a lot of these older spaces. They're built like when I say playgrounds, I'm not completely facetious, because a lot of these things were built more for the gameplay flow than how they might make sense in an actual like real ruin or fortress situation. I'm going to change the day file here, or the time of day here real quick. we go. Day file won't change quite yet because we've got to get out of the evil space. Yeah, it's one of the things that we did through a lot of our low-level game or basically through all of up to Angmar, is the concept of um, evilness and evil camps, and making sure that locations where we really wanted to emphasize where players should, feel a little bit of trepidation about where they are. Change what the sky looks like, and change the environment around the players, so that they have a different feel in the space. Um, I think we've moved away from that pretty heavily, and when we do those kinds of changes, they tend to be um, more associated with weather effects than changing the uh, the the whole sky outright. So we'll bring in the fog a little bit more, or we'll make it a stormy setting. We do this a lot in cold areas with like bringing in blizzards. All right, we're going to pause right here with the view of Weathertop real quick, and go through some more questions that we have. There's a relative, so Talirion, again, apologize to anyone if I mispronounce your names. There's a relatively large region north of Weathertop. Was it intended to be a special region like Treasure Hunt, or it just happens to be there? So a lot of that, a lot of the kind of terraformed landscape that you might be able to see outside of the bounds of playable space, some of it is built as far view, so that when you are up on those higher spaces, you're not just looking out on completely unfinished lands. And some of it is the original height map of the game when it was Middle Earth Online, when there was a larger focus on kind of this wilderness space. I think as we entered into development for Lord of the Rings Online, changing it from Middle Earth Online and changing the concept of the game, we wanted to focus more on more intimate, more polished regions, places where we were telling a story through it. We still do on occasion introduce these opportunities for kind of more free-form exploration. I think the original expansions to Breland were a case of that, and as well as what we even recently did with the additions to the Dimral Dale, to kind of match up with what we had done for Azanul Bazaar. Will we ever get to see the hobbits and dancing squirrels again? I don't know. That is a never say never, but we don't have any specific plans to go through and kind of make that a more legitimate access point for players. Originally, that was kind of like a fun little dev space that wasn't really intended to be something that players could get access to. And then we were overconfident in how our physics barriers work. And like so many other things, like where other players have gotten outside of the bounds of the playable terrain, the little hobbit dancing with the squirrels is an instance of that. All right, Little Redhead asks, with less lore information for this area, how did you come up with the Eglain and the overall landscape choices, like the troll area? So a lot of that was driven by taking a little bit of information that we could find, extrapolating it out a little bit more, and making some adjustments in order to support the gameplay that we need in the space. Like, we needed a faction for players to interact with here in order to get their quests. So the Eglain, as remnants of folk that lived in this region, kind of fit into that well. We also have the Earthkin that are in this area as well, which are kind of like a little Tolkien oddity. They don't really appear much in, or rather Lotro oddity. They don't really appear much outside of Lone Lands, North Downs, and Angmar. occasionally, like they show up in skirmishes, they show up occasionally as rare spawns here and there, but as a society, they don't have much attention paid to them. Um, so let's see. Weathertop was. So Ivanar also asked, Weathertop is almost due south of Doldinan in the North Downs, by the way. Could there ever be a connection? Again, one of those, like, never say never. I think the Lone Land, or not the Lands, the Wildwood edition kind of showed both our interest in filling in, the parts of the world that are not currently filled in, and also you all showed a lot of interest in that. Like Doldine, or not Doldine, Wildwood was really really well received. So doing something like connecting, the Lone Lands to Doldinan isn't something that's out of the realm of imagination. It's always just a matter of time and opportunity to do that. If we felt that there was a serious need for content of that would fit in that space, I think that's definitely something that we would consider. Um, Continuing on down through here, one of the stranger features of Lotro, evil camps always have dark, overcast skies with whirling clouds. Yeah, that internally we called that the evilification of Eriador. There was a point where I think we over the course of a couple of months kind of went through and earmarked a bunch of locations as candidates for making it a little bit more evil and a little bit more unsettling, to kind of show the corruption of Angmar spreading throughout the world. Not necessarily something that we do too much of nowadays, because our storytelling kind of leans in a different way. Shoreless Skies asks, was one of the reasons for changing the clouds to help explain goblins and working outside during the day? Not specifically for that, but there is certainly a side benefit of doing those changes. It does allow us to explain that away a little bit more. As we progressed in the game, it became harder and harder for us to justify certain monster camps and whatnot with like day and night stuff, or trying to make it always under the cover of shade, and eventually we've kind of put that to the side. There's a camp here in the Lone Lands as an example, that was like one of our like, oh, we want trolls outside, but it's going to be daytime and they can't be outside during the daytime, so they are underneath trees, and that's kind of how we justified that camp, and that doesn't always work everywhere. So we have had some story work that we've done ourselves in our own content, kind of indicating that things like certain trolls and certain other denizens of evil are a bit hardier than your normal lot, and can withstand being out in the open sun to some degree. So a couple of questions from Bluebriar Bear. Were you also in charge of creating weather? And an addendum to the weather question: is there a reason why sometimes we get tons of rain in game and other times where we never get it? So world designers are responsible for implementing, hooking up, and making adjustments to things like day files. We actually work pretty closely with art on this. Sometimes the art team comes in and polishes things like lighting and color. Sometimes we do. If there are new assets that we want in the sky, different kinds of clouds, different kinds of constellations, depending on the region you're in, the constellations change their positions a little bit. So we do a lot of that work. The reason why sometimes there's a lot of rain and sometimes it never gets it is because it's a random part of the system. When a day turns over, when a new day begins, there is kind of a random check to see, okay, you know, what what weather should we use? Should it be bright and sunny weather? Should it be cloudy weather? Should it be rainy weather? Should it be stormy weather? And based off of what the server says the weather should be like, it changes the day file. And sometimes it could roll, when the day changes over and it's a sunny day and it decides, okay, now it's a cloudy day. Or it could roll, rainy, and then the next day could also roll rainy, or it could roll rainy and stormy. So there's a lot of randomness there, and in part that kind of helps the world feel like it's a little bit living. One of the things we made sure to do was make sure that the days cycle frequently enough so that in a play session, while it's possible you may like be stuck in one day type, the chances of you being stuck in that same day type or that same time of day regularly when you log in are pretty low. So things progress. So you're not, every PlayStation, you're not getting the same type of weather. So Shoreless Skies asks, you mentioned possibility is going north or south. Any plans on South Downs anytime soon? Much like the area between North Downs and Lowlands, and the area between and other areas in the world, like I think there is a definite interest in us exploring those kind of unexplored areas. It's just a matter of having the right time and the right reason for it. So I think that probably answers a number of questions as I'm going through here. When you revamped the Lone Lands, you ended up placing 2 invisible walls in the Red Pass, blocking 2 important quest hubs. Not judging, only asking. Do you always encase the areas you're working on in invisible walls, and sometimes just forget to remove them? So I think in this case that is an accident and not intended. Certainly, if there are formerly accessible areas that are supposed to be accessible, that are no longer accessible, that have gotten blocked up accidentally, please let us know. Sometimes we'll be working on one side of the hill and not always realizing what might be on the other side of the hill. I think one of the things that we tried to do here in the Lone Lands with these changes was to kind of lower the impassables a little bit more in some spots, which required us to put up walls in spots that weren't supposed to be passable. And a side effect of that could have been blocking off access. So if that is the case, let us know where, and we can take care of it. Would it be possible to open the old Garth Garwin one big instance again for nostalgic reasons, or are they instances dysfunctional now? My understanding is that that old single instance has been broken down into multiple smaller spaces, so a lot of the mechanics and gameplay and just the back end behind it all is all functionally separate now. So I don't think we would be able to reintroduce the whole, one large instance concept without a considerable amount of additional work to kind of reconstitute all of that. It is really impressive, the silhouette that Weathertop has. All right, we're almost to the bottom of the list of questions. I'm burning through them today. Drink call. Just getting to it. There we go. So nowadays there are 3 Garth Garwin instances. In the former times, it was one big instance. I wonder if since the old converted skirmishes it's still accessible, but I cannot remember. So I'm reading through anyone. Cannot put one shooters. So a lot of how we handle impassibilities is on a systemic level, and there are certain places where we have done work to expressly punish players for going into places they're not supposed to, like Ettenmoors is an example of that. The kind of original plan for Lothlorien was going to be an example of that. You were supposed to die if you crossed into Lothlorien without having the blessings of the elves there. And similarly, crossing the Anduin from Lothlorien into Mirkwood, you get pincushioned. Um, so, but for general landscape stuff, I I personally don't like to. I am okay with players dying if it is their mistake, but if they happen to wander into an area unintentionally, I don't feel good about killing them. Which is why we opt for impassable physics instead of a death volume of some sort. So Timble Tanook asks, terms of the Lonelands landscape, what is your favorite thing there? So for me, it's these trees. These trees just make me so happy. The kind of like windswept, scraggly, like from the perspective of a designer, they feel like they make a good canopy, and they're not obstructive as you're running around underneath them. They create really nice silhouettes in the distance. Um, yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of the Lonelands is just how those trees feel. It may sound weird, but that's what it is. Yeah, so over last weekend was Weatherstock. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but I know there were a few of us here at SSG that were watching it and enjoying the performances that were happening there. Um, Mary Alice asked, "Do you guys have one or several development servers, or can you spin up a server locally?" So we have the ability on our own development systems to launch a server and a client, so we can run it all locally to do our own unit testing, so that we can do even potentially dangerous work, risky work locally and make sure it works before we submit our work and risk breaking things for everyone else. We also have internal test servers that are primarily used by our QA folk, but are often sometimes used by us for internal playdays. We have Palantir, which is the private, NDA locked um, preview server that we've been running for a while now. I'm not sure how long it's been running. I know it's been going for a long time. And then there are the live servers. So there are all of these different environments with which we can interact with the game and check things out and test things, and all with different levels of risks associated with them. So Kobold Warlord asks, and are you responsible for designing the Garthagarwin instance layout? They're some of my favorites, even when they're not level scaling, and one of the reasons is the nice and flowing instance feeling. So Garthagarwin was a number of people all working on it. I think there were a few different world designers that kind of cycled in and out on it. There were a number of content designers and instance designers that were cycling in and out on it. So a lot of different people had their hands on Garthagarwin. I think we went through several passes on the Red Swamp as a whole, in terms of looking at it from the perspective of how it looked, how it felt, the environment and the ambience there. So there's oftentimes, particularly for instances, there are a lot of eyes on those kinds of spaces from the world perspective. Because sometimes too, like you get it when you are working like intently and deeply on something, you don't always you don't necessarily always see ways you can improve things. So having extra sets of eyes on things helps a lot. We often do regular art reviews locally. So that we kind of have that opportunity for other eyes to look at and see things. And yes, Tim Bolton UK, I got it now, and I'll remember that. So there are a couple of apparent stubs in Harlowig that make me wonder. First one is on the hillside northwest corner. It's a strange floating tree with no trunk there. It needs work. From there, path goes up cliffside, but dead ends just short of the hilltop. Was there at the beginning of something? Um, was there going to be a feature on top of the cliff hill or a cave going in? Seems like a strangely smooth path. Possibly. I don't know if there are like floating and broken assets. Certainly, we'll want to go through and fix those. I do know there were some bugs that I had fixed in this area because the updates that we had done recently to the landscape kind of adjusted the terrain a little bit, which meant that there were some things that were, stuck in the ground that needed to be moved up. So there may have been plans at one point that just got scrapped. Someone was working on something, they had an idea for something, and then just kind of decided to move on to other things, which happens sometimes. Someone thinks that someone has an idea, they want to go with it, and then they decide to do something different. All right, I need a drink break. I'm trying to be better and on top of this because it is grossly hot out today here in New England. So Squirrel asks, in general, do you design differently for in-between areas in the middle of two major quest hubs landmarks such as Weathertop? Do you design differently for in-between areas in the middle of... So are you saying we have two major POI anchors, point of interest anchors? Do we design what goes on between them differently than we would just normal open landscape? I don't necessarily think so. I think as we build and design landscape, we try to keep in mind good lookout points, good vantage points where players can kind of stand and take in the view, and so I think that's probably the biggest design consideration that we have for a lot of those kind of in-between spaces. Like, where can we facilitate those cool screenshot moments? Certainly being up on top of Weathertop is a cool screenshot moment, but as you're kind of traversing around, you want to be able to have those other cool experiences, those other cool moments. You want to be able to see the silhouette of Weathertop. You want to see the ruins of Oscaruth. You want to have those good moments as you're going along. When building landscape too, it's always important to kind of imply where you want people to go using the landscape to kind of lead their eye. So if you're building a road, you might want to, hey, sweet, I completed a deed. As you're building a road through an area, maybe you want to have the terrain kind of sculpted up around the road a little bit so that when you look at it, your eyes kind of automatically see the road in the valleys of those hills. All right. Blueberry Bear asks, do you have the capabilities to design underwater landscapes, like, say, to dive for treasures? Well, right now, our system doesn't support that. If there was ever a point where we wanted to introduce something like that, it would require some systems changes, and it would require a lot of animation support to make that happen. Not sure when or if that would happen, but that's where where the answer to that question lies. Now that Sauron has fallen, could we rebuild Oscaruth a bit like Pikebolts? I know there's a lot of interest in kind of rebuilding aspects of the world as we advance the story, as we progress later and later into the story of Middle Earth. I think I think if spaces are built with that in mind intentionally, it's a bit easier to do than um, to kind of retrofit it. Particularly if a lot of the story in that area is built around that space's destruction. Um, so I think like rebuilding Archit has complications because of all of the different layers of things that are happening in that space. You have your beginner experience in there, you have your low level experience in there, and that makes the idea of going through and kind of like doing a Hitbolt style rebuild tricky, um, just because of how complicated that space is. Um, I think we did a little bit of that in a little bit of that in Trestlebridge as part of the Wildwood update, and I think I think that's kind of like a subtle nod. I think one of the challenges that we have with doing that also is, our current phasing tech, which is what we use for Hitbolt and for a lot of things to, um, a lot of things to, um, sorry, lost my train of thought. So I think for a lot of things to change like that, we would rather have it be a space that isn't intentionally built to do that. Like Hitbolt is. Phasing is tricky too. Now I remember my train of thought. Uh, Phasing is tricky to do because right now our phasing can't influence the physics of a space. Um, so not having the ability to actually change the physical space is potentially problematic. Like in order for it to really feel like you're making actual physical substantial change, um, it doesn't feel as good. It can look impressive, but it just doesn't feel as good. Um, yeah, I found the almost spider lair. So Lils of Laurelin says, no, don't touch old areas. So I think our intent with going back to older areas in terms of with an eye towards polish is more to try to help bring those areas back up to a closer to modern standard of look and feel. Um, Unless we have a serious, considerable reason to go through and overhaul the content in the space, the flow of the space, I doubt that we would kind of like carte blanche things. I doubt we would like flatten it out and try to build it again because it's a lot of work, and we understand that there is a lot of nostalgia around a lot of areas. Um, Thurlore says the problem is when two players have different versions of the area. If a building only exists in player A's version, it looks weird when player B walks through it. There is certainly that oddity, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have phased combat either, because we don't want to have the experience of a player just like flailing around in the air to other players because they can't see the orc or troll that's being fought because they're not in the right quest phase for it. All right, so we are heading out of Harloweg, and we're heading up north to our friend the Red Swamp. I don't know that I will go through. Well, I can't go that way. This is another hallmark of our kind of older design theories that I think we're slowly getting away from, is having too many dead end spaces where you go and go and go for a while only to find out that you can't actually get to where you think you're supposed to go. It's particularly challenging with having a map system that doesn't really help you too much through the world. It's a very like as the crow flies kind of thing. Let's see. One of the first things I wish could be fixed in older areas is having corpse we buried stay buried. All those dead guys we buried in Archit are still lying around. Yeah, so I think there may be opportunities for phasing passes to go through to kind of help maintain that persistence in the world space, but it's not something that I think is really a priority for us. Yes, if only I had a jetpack that would launch you up cliff sides. I like to use that sparingly because I want to give you guys give you all the experience, on the ground experience instead of the cheaty admin experience. I do have to say too, this is one of my favorite bits too. I think this water is just like creepy and feels good and like is just unnatural enough and has enough of a contrast to the rest of the landscape that it really pops. Um, so now we're going into Garth Garwin. Like I said, I don't know that I will get through the entirety of the instance spaces, just because there's a lot of running that has to happen to get through those. But I remember when this first was first introduced, how hard it was. Like my poor little burglar was not having a good time through here because everything has some sort of aura that would automatically pop me out of stealth, and then I would die, or sorry, be defeated. Um, so Edith Aldora asks, what causes NPC pathing to be erratic, like guards climbing over lampposts or trying to walk through walls? Our when we put an NPC on a path, it is specifically trying to go point to point on that path, and sometimes it's physics, where the path is placed, and the physics of the NPC are too close to other physics, and it'll like bump up against things and thinks it needs to step up now because it's bumped into physics. There are a number of different reasons why there might be like weird erratic pathing behaviors. Sometimes it's an NPC is trying to get to a point that it thinks it should be able to get to, but there's something else standing on that point, or something else in the way of it walking to that point. If there's another monster or something that it's in its way and it's trying to get there, but the monster isn't letting it path through, that kind of thing. So there are a variety of different unfortunate reasons for that to happen. At the end of the day, our AI, when it comes to walking around and whatnot, is not all that intelligent. It knows kind of the high level of where it can walk and where it can't walk. But when it's on a patrol, all it cares about is that patrol, and that's the path it has to follow. Um, let's see. I like that you guys kept the creepy red water in Morghast Argonath. Yeah, I think the red water is an impressive look. I made a variation on that for I think the Stout Axe starter experience that was kind of an even like sludgier red water. Let's see. Can we now? So this is one of my favorite areas. Good for solo, but also a bit of a challenge if you want it. Not that many quest hubs around. Yeah, so I think there's only really that one quest hub in this space. When you do enter the instances, you'll get a bunch of quests that pop up in there, and a lot of those are actually versions of quests that used to be bestowed outside of the instance, and I think they just moved them as auto bestows in the instance and made them repeatable. But I remember going through like portions of this when it was, instanced and just having a hard time. But then I also remember taking my burglar through at level like 70 and just owning the whole space, so it was a nice little bit of retribution. The way you split your maps into chunks, is there a theoretical size limit for any particular space? Do you ever run into issues with tech apart from mounted combat? So in terms of our landscape, we do keep our landscape terrain set at a specific dimension, and that's for any region that we make. Um, we found that that's a pretty good size, and the way that the systems and the tools manage that is good. Um, I think where size is more of an issue is in dungeon spaces, because those don't have kind of the luxury of splitting things up quite as much as we do on landscape. That said, there are certainly some areas of landscape that kind of push it. Um, Minas Tirith is an example of that. That's certainly an area that kind of pushes it. Mobs can path through each other, but they will sometimes, prefer to or opt to kind of path around. Oh, I don't want to fight things. Alright. I just want to look at stuff. There we go. I get completely lost in here. I wish there was a more detailed map from Edith Eldora. Um, yeah, I think that's certainly something that we've put a little bit more effort into for landscape instances. Is trying to have a map to go along with them. I don't think when this was broken up that concept was really present. And it's not to say that we wouldn't do that for this again if we were ever to really like focus in and revamp this, or do it for other spaces. All right, let's see. Died so many times getting to the outer gates on my Runekeeper on level. That isn't the enemy you're looking for. So Lils of Laurelin asks, any news on options where we can adopt to using old maps like the old Shire map? It is definitely something that we have heard from everyone, and we know it's a request, and we know it's something that you all would really, really like to see. And it's something that I think it's something that is not out of the question for the future, but not specifically on any of our timetables right now. I know answers like that are never the satisfying answer. They're never the kinds of answers that people really like or want to hear. But I feel like that's that's where we're at with it right now. It's on our bucket list. We are considering it, but we don't have any time frame for it. Do you play in-game or free time, or does it remind you too much of work too much? I do play in my free time. I have a level capped Guardian, and am currently working on bringing my Bjorning up to level cap in time for Gundabad, which I'm making considerable use of the mission system to help me get that. I've been basically playing the epic story and missions to level myself up. Some people on the forums don't like the new, more detailed maps. I guess it wouldn't hurt to let them use old maps if they prefer. Yeah, and I think that's really the thought process behind it. Is like, we know there is a degree of nostalgia surrounding those older maps, and it's something that I think if we were to add that system, we would happily support, but we would need to actually build that system, and we have a laundry list of other large engineering tasks that need to happen first. Norias asked, what was used for inspiration for the Hillfolk clothing and armors? I actually don't really know off the top of my head on that. I don't have an answer for you. Some of them are kind of like some of these guys here are a bit more brigandy looking. But yeah, I couldn't say specifically what the inspiration um, for some of their more unique cultural outfits was or is. Um, I assume you now use the upper limits of what you can do graphics wise, or do technical possibilities always improve? So I think one of the things we try to do a lot is push, what the engine can do, what the game can do. Sometimes we probably push it a little too hard. Sometimes we just need to push it more smartly. Um, I think things like the uh, attenuated lighting system is a great example of a new um, engine feature, basically, that has helped improve the look and feel of the game. And I know that our tech art team is working on, other new ideas and features that they can introduce to help improve the, visual fidelity of the game. So it's something where we're always trying to find like new ways to add things um, without being too burdensome on the client. Issue new maps is really clarity. It's really very hard to see quest rings on new maps, especially at higher resolution monitors. So I've heard that, and I know that is something that the UI team is actually currently thinking about, but I don't have anything beyond um, to say on that beyond their thinking about it. Let's see. All right. I like the Red Maid Festival instance. A Little Red Head and was nice to revisit it, but in a smaller way. Yeah, that was a fun little kind of interior to rebuild. We don't often get to take something from landscape and bring it into a dungeon space. And when we were talking about doing that instance, um, one of the thoughts was bringing it into doing a landscape copy, and I took it on myself to just try to like recreate the space as much as I could in a dungeon interior, so without any landscape or terrain to help me support it. And I think I did fairly well. There are differences definitely between the original space and the festival space, but hopefully they aren't egregious enough to kind of give you that wah-huh moment. Um, yeah, so unfortunately, I think we're going to wrap up our tour of the Lone Lands in the Red Swamp. I know there's still a little bit more to go um, but there is something that I wanted to kind of to show to you guys a bit beforehand. So use up these last 10 minutes. As much as I'm sure you would all love to see the dancing squirrels, I have a feeling that you're probably going to like this even better. Um, this is a special surprise, a special preview. This is a place that you all will hopefully be visiting in the very near future. So I would like to introduce you to we're going to do a brief tease of a couple of things that we are going to be bringing to you in the Gundabad expansion pack. Um, Starting with a brief glimpse of an area that many of you have probably seen um, and don't mind the TBD landmark. You've seen the map notes on it from um, when we introduced Elderslade. So we're coming down the hill here from Elderslade, and let me get on. No, we won't get on my goat. This is a little bit faster. So this is the pass from Elderslade up into Carbranach. This is one of the areas that is being introduced as part of the Gundabad expansion pack. One of our major goals with Gundabad was to make sure that we had a bit more variety in the landscape that you were exploring. Um, as great as Moria is, um, it is certainly possible to be very fatigued um, in the space. It's possible to visit Moria and then get very tired of it because you're in a cave the whole time. So with Carbronach and a couple of other areas in Gundabad, you're getting out into the landscape up and around the mountains of Gundabad. Um, and this is an area in particular that we've built using some new world design processes that help us kind of build more realistic looking landscapes faster. Again, this is in progress work, so there's still work to be done, polish to be had, but this is one of the areas that you will get to see. We're doing a quick spin through this, and there are a couple other little spots that I want to show off to you guys, and then we'll wrap it up. Unfortunately, I'm not going to take anyone inside Gundabad yet. We want to really, save that reveal for something a little bit bigger and more special. But this felt like a nice, opportunity to, kind of run around in a part of the Gundabad expansion without giving away too much. We don't want to spoil all the surprises, so we're running through this with no context for you all right now. And you'll see lots of TBDs as I step into things that we haven't quite made names for yet. And this is one of the entrances into Gundabad up here. And a dwarf fortress heavily influenced by Angmarum aesthetic. So let's see if I can. And then we'll do a quick. So one of the things that a place like Gundabad also really lends itself to is lots of dungeon interiors. So the Gundabad expansion pack does have a lot of mission interiors, ancillary dungeon interiors, instance interiors, and they're all things that we're trying to kind of like play with something familiar and something new at the same time. And then one other, bit of trivia and whatnot for Gundabad itself, which you may have noticed just in thinking about the look of Carbronach, is, Moria was a very tunnel and hallway kind of experience. Not a lot of verticality at play, even though we tried to imply changes in elevations based off of which hall you were in. With Gundabad, one of our major, intents with gameplay and with landscape design is to try to push verticality in the space and have taller structures, more over-under, more pitfalls than we had seen in Moria, in part to really differentiate the areas from one another. So we'll take a look at one more dungeon space, and then I think it'll be time for us to call it on this casual stroll. There will no doubt be much more of this scene in the coming weeks and months. I think we've all been working on this for a while now. The World Team in particular has been working on Gundabad since about this time last year. Whereas content and systems have been rolling onto it as of towards the end of the year. So we've been putting a lot of work into this space. We've got a lot of great looking landscape. We've got a lot of great looking dungeons and instances that are going to be coming along with it. So we're really excited for you all to see more. Particularly in these spaces, trying to use either older assets or assets that we haven't used too much before in different ways, just to give something a little bit more interesting and varied than you'd seen before. So, that I think will wrap it up for us on this casual stroll of the Lone Lands, and also a little bit of Gundabad. So thank you everyone for showing up, asking your questions. We'll do one quick look through to see if there's anything else that I missed. But otherwise, let's see. So Iwanar says, it should be possible to travel the Misty Mountains from top to bottom, starting at Gundabad, walking the trails from the current Misty Mountain regions, more trails to Redhorn Pass, without leaving the mountains. Certainly it would be interesting to be able to do that. If we were having a content reason for us to send you down through all of that way. Anyways, thank you everyone for joining in, asking your questions, spending your afternoon with me. We hope you enjoy your time in LOTRO and any upcoming events. I hope you're having fun on Shadowfax and on Treebeard. I know a lot of people seem to be enjoying both of those servers. And yeah, we'll see you all next time. And maybe the Trollshaws will win. It's up to you guys. Have a good one, and thanks a lot.